Good afternoon, people. This is your boy, Mr. Retard X, aka Louie X, here with my guest of this afternoon, the one and only Miss Denise Sanders, also known on the mic, aka The One. Good afternoon, Denise.
Good afternoon, everybody.
How you guys doing? Well, we're going to start this segment off. Welcome to Poetry Unveiled. I will be your host and analyst, and every week we will be having a poet. Every Saturday at 1 p.m. we'll be having a poet on, and we will be analyzing poetry. Remember that these are only opinions and coming from an analytical point of view, and we'll dive inside poetry. So make sure you spread the word, tell everybody, click like, share, and watch our video, and we'll be back next week with another poet, and every Saturday at 1 p.m. live Houston time. So we're just going to get right into it. Tell us first of all about yourself, Ms. Denise.
Well, I am a sweetheart, but savage at heart, just kidding, but not kidding. So, been in Houston for about 20 years. Done from four. Shouts out to the fun, how y'all doing? And mother of two. Just doing what I love to do. So.
Okay, well, we're going to jump right into poetry. If for you guys that out there don't know, The One, she has 2 books out. Her first book was published in what year?
2013.
2013, and it's called Life Lesson in Poetry.
Life Lessons in Poetry.
And it's a book. We're going to dive into one of those poems in there. I read it. I had some people read it and review it, and they love it. Now remember, we analyze poetry. We don't critique it. It's different. So when we analyze poetry, what we do is talk about the symbolic meanings, talk about the message display, talk about the poet and what they had in mind. So Ms. Denise, what's the second book?
Okay, my second book is actually Emotional Stamina. It is, trust me, it is one of those must-reads. Definitely everybody will find something, that one poem that will touch you in some type of way, whether it's from your past, present, or something that you dabble and dabble with in between. And it's personal. I mean, I don't think you can truly be a writer in poetry without touching personally a little bit, unless everything will be fiction, and that's a little different. And I don't write fiction, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a look. Poetry. When did you first start writing poetry? Like, what made you start writing poetry?
I've actually been a published poet since I was 15. So I have been 20 years in the game, pretty much. 20 years in the game. So actually, I used to actually use it as a way to deal with my anger originally. I'm like, okay, we see enough jail time, we see enough adult sins in juvenile detention, and I'm like, okay, I'm cute and I'm stocked, it ain't gonna know what field I'm playing in, so I better stay out of jail.
Oh, true to that.
Yeah.
So when we look at poetry, I think out of all of the arts and talents, I think poetry is one of the most unserviced and unrecognized. You know, we have great poems like David Wilson, we have great poets like Anthony Thompson, we have great poets like Maya Angelou, and these people kind of paved the way. But in the last decade, poetry has been spotted. I mean, it's been spotted here and there, and when you hear of it, you don't hear of it like you hear about music, you know, MTV Awards, you hear about the BET Awards, and every now and then you have Grand Slams, which basically are known for New York because they're big on poetry. Shout out to Kevin and Dave in New York. Real great poets, they put together a poetry Grand Slam. And LA, they have a lot of poets up there, and I'm probably missing some other cities, but I'm just talking about the cities that I've visited and I've actually witnessed poetry in. So when we talk about you, Miss, what type of poetry, like music has a genre. You know, you have jazz, you have rock and roll, you have hip hop, R&B. So if you had to classify your poetry in a genre, what would be its genre and why?
I would just say that's kind of hard because I write about everything. So I would just stick it in nonfiction.
Okay, nonfiction. So a lot of your poetry are about true life events.
Yes.
So what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to read one of your poems, and it's actually out of your first book. And it's on page 13, and you can turn to it. And you guys that have the book out there, I want you guys to turn to it. It's page 13, and this poem is called Fresh. And the thing about it is like you ever hear like a chant, or you ever hear like a roar or a call to the people. It's not real lengthy, but I want you to read it, and then we're going to dive into it.
Okay, it's been years since I read this.
All right.
Attention all people young and old. Expand your mind and be bold. Seek understanding above the clouds. Turn down the bass in your speakers. Your foolishness is too loud. Think of your elders who have come and gone. They put in a prayer for you so that you could stay strong. Live on in the character that was bestowed on you. Stop inviting issues in your territory. They don't belong to you. Breathe in prosperity and abundance and pop your collar at the rest. Love hard, stand firm, and most of all, stay fresh.
Wow, that was exciting. I don't know about you guys, but that kind of gave me chills when I heard it. I can compare it to some poems that I heard, but why don't you tell us, what were you thinking when you wrote this, and what was the message that you were giving out?
Okay, so Fresh is just one of those things. When I mentally received my own title, because I always get my title first and then I just take it from there, was what's going on in the world, or what is it that I see through my eyes that can be refreshed to become fresh. So it's like certain things that we may have been raised with or we were taught to do, and we just kind of put it aside, or dust it. It needs to be dusted off the shelf. Like may have an old picture, it just needs to be dusted off a little bit. It's still nice. It's probably sitting in the perfect spot. Just needs some dust off of it to remind you this happened. It's
Wow.
just like a little reminder to yourself. Hey, I know better, do better.
So when we hear Fresh, is there a certain audience? And if there's a certain audience, what should they expect when they hear Fresh?
Fresh was really targeted to, I'm guessing, 25 to 30. And I say that because if you're reaching under 25, a lot of those young adults are still so immature they wouldn't receive it. And 30 and above, most of you guys are above certain things already. So either you're going to receive it or you're not. But that 25 to 30 bracket is just like, come on, shake the dust off your shoulders. But let's get it.
Oh, great. And one of the incredible things about Denise's poetry is the similes and hyperbole she used. You could be thinking about an object, as most poets do. They could be talking descriptively about one object and mean something totally different. And the incredible about you guys, you poets, is that you have a way of taking words and articulating them and restructuring them, where you give your feelings, your emotions in it. You bring out life. It's like you can actually see your words, sort of like you can hear sound, but you can actually see words. And that's incredible because it gives the imagination to go any which way that it wants. And speaking of imagination going any way you want, what happens, or have you ever experienced a audience or experienced a listener that totally got something you never expect from your own poetry?
Yes. I used to know this security guard, and she was so funny. I love this lady. I used to work over the old night manager at CBS. And she was so funny. So when the first book came out, and she was like, oh, people been waiting for it because they see me in between writing, and they're like, what are you writing? And I'm like, I have to get this down right now. So they're like, oh, okay, well, let me know when it's the finished product. So finally the finished product is ready or whatever. And she reads it, and she's like, girl, do you mind if I write this poem down? And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, I'm going to get it to my boyfriend. And I was like, first of all, to me, it was a sad poem. I mean, I literally, this was actually one of the poems that was put on my heart to write that had nothing to do with me. And it saddened me, and at the time, I thought my dad was sick. So when I was writing crying, because I was like, oh my God, he talks about you can still smell his cologne in the doorway, but you don't see him as a person. But it's talking about all the things that remind you of him. And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, let me call Dad. And I'm like, Dad, are you sick and not telling anybody? You can, you're my dog. Tell me, I need to be prepared. And he just got silent, and he was like, girl, what are you talking about? I was like, whew, it's not him. Coincidentally, at the time, I did have the publisher that I was using, his uncle just died. When I wrote the poem, his uncle just died.
Wow.
When I read him the poem, I think they just came from his funeral, or they were about to make arrangements for the funeral. And he said that poem was for his aunt.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, so I'm one of those type of writers too. So it's just amazing. It's refreshing. Not that I wanted anybody to pass or anything like that, but it's just, the two different ways. Because though that poem was sad to me, it was sad to him in that aspect. But to her, it was a mofo, you gotta go. And I'm like, girl, shut up. Shut the front back door side window. But it's just amazing because I was just in awe, like, how could you get that out of that? I don't get it. But that's the beauty in poetry. So, words speak to each individual differently, and that's why we love it.
That's incredible. I think when I first heard of poetry, and I don't know if you would classify it, poetry was more or less like a Cat in the Hat, Dr. Seuss. You hear the rhyming, you hear you talking about something or telling a story, because you have those poets who give you little small clips of movies, and then you have those poets that give you expression of the heart, expression of the mind. Then you have those poets that can be a little risky and political poets, and you have poets that are very articulate and so articulate. Sometimes, do you believe in poetry that poets can go so deep in their self to where the poetry doesn't reach the listener? And before you answer that question, and other poets out here, if you want to chime in, feel free to chime in. Is it possible, or is it been done, where a poet writes so deep or into themselves something that nobody gets it?
Yes.
So how do you keep from going in your head too deep? Sometimes you'll hear some music, not to put my man Kanye West out there, he did a song called Poopity Scoop. Nobody in the world knows what Poopity Scoop is. And then it means something to somebody else, like your money, it probably means your loved one, your jewelry, your swag, or whatever. But when people heard it, they was just like, oh my goodness. And it was a hit. And you can Google it or you can YouTube it. Throughout this whole song, he just says poopity scoop. But do poetry and poets can articulate so, I don't want to say intellectual, I'm going to say artistic, to where we can't relate because we don't know where they're going.
Just like a musician, just like a swimmer, just like a basketball player, just like a track star. Sometimes in our lives, and whatever our gift is or whatever our talent is that we're operating in, sometimes we need to take a step back. We all need that. And I say that because sometimes we do need a refresher. Sometimes we can be so deep into it that we're not into it. and in that your audience is suffering for it. The audience is the people that appreciate you and that appreciate your talents and your gifts. When you go off the rail like that, they're suffering. Everybody, especially those that are close to you, that love you, you get two types of people that are close to you and love you. You have those that's just like, excuse my French, cut shit, get stuff together. And then you have those that sit back and don't say anything, like, oh my God, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I want them to know I love them, I appreciate them. Most times we know these things, unless you're that standoffish, but it helps when we already know that you love us and that you care for us to pull us aside in that. Like, yeah,
Wow.
I need you to take a whole seat, several seats, and sit down for a while.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
That's it. So, do you write for yourself and hope people grasp the poetry, or do you write for an audience, or does it depend on the venue? Because I noticed that, and I've been following you for a while, and I know, like, when you guys go to certain venues, there was a certain venue, and it was sort of like a sensual type sort of setting. And I noticed when you were there, your poetry, although it had sex appeal, but it wasn't in that genre. Have you ever found yourself at a venue, and you guys that book poets, you really need to be careful about the poet that you have in your venue, because, you know, Mother's Day, everybody's saying poetry about mothers is self-explanatory. Father's Day, same thing. But when you start having these Thirsty Thursdays and Sensuous Saturdays, and you invite a poet that's not in that genre, what tends to happen in the midst of that poetry?
Oh my God. Okay, so though I can write erotic poetry just because I'm talented, I can write about anything, and I do write about anything and everything. Sometimes it is some things can push you so out of what you're used to that you almost get lost in trying to pull together the words to say just for that. Like, it's not really your element. You can do it because of the God-given talent that you have,
Right.
but it is not what you do. It's just like some people can actually ride a bike, but they wouldn't do it in a professional bike race.
Okay.
So they can do it and they're pretty fast and all of that. When they time themselves, they're not at that speed to compete in it, but they do it well. A lot of us don't know the difference. A lot of times you get stuck in a category, and I have to tell people all the time, no, I'm not that type of poet. I can be for the event, but don't say this is the type. I write about any and everything. Whatever hits the tip of this brain, baby, I'm writing about it. Anything. It could be how dirty the backyard is. Let's get it.
So it's not specific when most, would you say, poems write to a genre. It's just whatever's inside come out, and then we as the audience, or the listeners, or the critics, or the people that analyze it, we put it in a category based upon what we hear, but it's not written like that. Is that what I'm understanding?
It depends on the person.
So,
Right.
okay, so it depends on the person and the way they write. So you have certain poets, and I've experienced across the Houston area, Philadelphia, New York, they stay in just a genre. They stay into, like, if they're an erotic poet, they write erotic poetry. But then when they step out of their comfort zone, maybe they're having a brain fart, or maybe they're having a thought or something they're going through, they have a tendency to write outside of their scope, and it doesn't sound right. You know, and I think we as artists, we love each other. Sometimes I think we give praise and we give, helpful cheers, and we give, hey, you did a great job, and, we clap and we snap. But in the back of our recess in our minds, we go home and be like, what the hell just happened? You ever find yourself sitting there, if you write, when do you know a poem is ready? Like, when do you know, like, okay, that's it?
Okay, so I can't speak for anybody else, but I can speak for me personally. If I'm writing something whenever I get that title, I have to hop on it right away. And when I hop on it right away, I do feel like a freak when I'm writing because I need quiet. I don't want to be bothered. Let me write and get it over with. And then I'll send to you when it's over. It is, when I'm done, I'm excited for somebody to hear it. I'm like, oh, okay, you ready. I'm excited to hear it. I do have those faithful few in my life that I will, as soon as I'm finished, hey, I'm making that phone call, or, you know, I'm going, hey, I need you to hear this. I'm sending that phone call, I'm sending that text. Hey, you got a few minutes of your time, I need your opinion on this. And the thing is, I wrote it, so technically I really don't need your opinion, but I want your opinion. Because I want to know what you see about what I wrote, how you feel about what I wrote, to see if you feel the same way, or do you see, am I putting those words, am I walking those words so you can see the picture that I'm trying to paint? Which it doesn't matter because it's poetry. But it's just, it's refreshing to hear different points of view from male, female, close friends, close family, those that are from afar. Just the, just listening to it is amazing to me because everybody's different.
Is there such thing as bad poetry?
I've heard bad poetry before.
Now that's an opinion, or is there such, can you do, like I remember the first time I heard a haiku. I couldn't relate to that as poetry, but until I learned about haikus, the structure and the way it was delivered, I was like, okay, and then I learned to appreciate it. I'm asking you, is there bad poetry? Like somebody wrote something that makes no sense to the listener, it's no rhythm, there's no flow, they just talking. They just, the dog in the green car in the kitchen and 2 eggs, and that's the poetry.
Let me tell you something. And I'm not going to sit here and act like, you know, I'm just, like that shit don't stink. But
no, we just analyze it.
Right?
We just analyze it.
I've heard poetry, and I am big on facial expressions.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had so many moments where I literally just have to remind myself, shut up. Wow. Don't say. I had to remind myself like a mother telling their kid, shut up and sit down. Don't say nothing.
Okay.
Don't say nothing.
Okay.
I've had moments when I was actually in an audience, and I've had quite a few times when I was online and I'm listening and I'm like, what the hell was that? Are y'all real? And I understand you do want to encourage. Mm-hmm. You want to encourage, you know, that person to continue to pick up that pen. I get it. I know. But at the same time, if they ask for your honest opinion, please give it to them. Wow. Because you're doing us a disservice lying. And then people like me have to sit and hold my face like I have a fart that I'm holding. Mm-hmm. It's uncomfortable because don't ask me. Please don't ask me. And you know it's trash. And I have to be like, keep writing.
That's what.
It's not a good feeling.
And I think a lot of artists can be, you know, there's a saying that poems have too. There's a saying that a lot of artists have and a lot of poets have. And one of the lines I think we misconstrued when it said we are sensitive about our art. But they say, you know, they say the other word. And when I look at that, when I analyze, I talked to a poet, one of my local Houston poets, and I was speaking to him. I said, you know, when you say that, do you mean you're sensitive in meaning if I give you my opinion or what I got about it? Because when you deliver a poem, just like a singer, when they deliver a song, you're going to have those critics out there. You're going to have those people that's going to look out there and be like, man, that song really moved me, or like, I don't know what in the world that was about. It's not for me. Yes, there is a genre, or yes, there is a poem for everyone, and you're not going to be able to please everyone. But the art of poetry, unlike music, unlike a lot of the other ones, if I went to the NBA, I would get trashed. I'm not an NBA player. That's the reality of it. I love basketball, I love everything about basketball, I love all the teams and everything, but I can't go out there and I can't play basketball, even though I might have a desire to do it. And what happens to that person or persons who they hear poetry and they get so enthused about it, where they grab a pen and then they start writing, and I'm not calling their stuff trash, but they start writing something and they don't have the talent. What do you say to those persons?
Again, please, poets and poet enthusiasts, be honest. Be honest. Even if you just have to inbox that person, especially if you know them personally, be like, yo, dog, hey, what's on your mind? You know, just start with the little stuff, and probably they're probably going through something. It probably started out a particular type of way and ended up because their thought process went elsewhere. So stop the lies, people. Just please stop it.
Wow.
Poetry is supposed to be genuine and beautiful. Yes, you have truth and you have stuff that's not true. But at the same time, in poetry, if you're going to put something out there, you have to be able to accept that the way you put it out there ain't the way that it's going to be received all the time. So just because you thought something was real hot and then like, okay. Be grateful and appreciate the fact that they had anything to say. And I mean, long as they're not dogging you, please, I'm begging you. So everything is not made for everybody to hear.
Okay. And so when we talk about poetry, and as it compares to music and other arts, why do you think poetry is so unrecognized? And I'm just speaking about the Houston area because there's a lot of poetry that goes on, but there has yet to be a collaboration where the artists are recognized and put on mainstream. Like, I can turn the TV on and watch any kind of movie. I can even watch art galleries and art shows. But very seldom and very rare. And if anybody know of any venues that they can, give other poetry, just drop it in the comments. This video is going to be posted for your later watching. But drop it in there because I think that poetry in Houston needs to be recognized in the Houston community because I did not realize, and I'm comparing this from Philadelphia and New York, and I've been to hundreds of events in both states. But when I came to Houston, I found out that poetry was started. How do you get recognized, or how do you go from that beginning doing poetry free, and people, I believe that your gifts will make provision. I read that in a great book somewhere, and you guys that know that, you would know where that came from. But I believe that your gifts will make provisions, and in these times that we're in now, where the economy is crazy, and anybody who has a business will tell you the struggles that they go through. But for a poet who has the product up here, how come, or what do you think is the reason that it's not marketed, and maybe that's the word I'm looking for, or maybe not recognized amongst the other mainstream arts? We have an art gallery right downtown in Houston. Matter of fact, every city has an art gallery where art is displayed. But these little venues, and like the venues that I've been to in just the south part of Houston and some of the north Houston, you get a venue with maybe 30, maybe 40 people. But if you go to a Jay-Z concert, and I don't mean to use Jay-Z as an example, but if you go to one of these music concerts, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. Why do you think that poetry is not recognized or even entertained like music, for instance?
Okay. So let's start. For starters, everybody don't understand poetry. Last year, I actually had a coworker. We both worked at the hospital. We worked in different areas, and he actually heard one of my poems online, and it's called "You." And I was describing the king that was on his way into my life. And he was like, wow, These are his words. He said, I usually don't understand poetry because a lot of them go so overboard trying to use all these big words that most people don't understand. He said that your words cut straight through to the point and it was exciting at the same time.
Wow. Wow. That's music. That's a music. That's what music does. And the second part of the question was why aren't you guys as poets like I have yet to turn on the television and see a poetry event.
Okay.
Locally or nationally for that case.
Okay, well first of all, you don't have people putting money into it. You don't have
So money is one of those big things.
Money talk, biz. You have a lot of people that have all this lip service, but they ain't about their life. Yeah.
Okay.
They got their lip service, don't cash no checks. Lip service don't pay no bills. So they talk all this big talk, but then when it comes time to write a plan, put things into stages to build, you can't find it.
Right.
Like all of a sudden they was everywhere. Then what happened? Say, dog, I think he moved to a different city, or I don't know. You never know. It's just like they build you up for this great fall. You get all excited. You know, it's like a boxer getting his fresh robe on. You know, getting ready to go out there and fight, and all of a sudden the fight is canceled.
Wow.
But I got new gloves. I got my name on the back. I'm ready. Like them do. Got my chest shaved. You just gonna tell me I'm not fighting? I did all this training for nothing. So it's just like, I don't think, and obviously because we don't see it, so it's not just me thinking, the proof is in the pudding.
Right.
If you say you making a cake and you ain't put no eggs in it, baby, you got no cake.
Okay. So the thing that I'm interested in, and now I'm going to get a little deeper, and we're going to get, it's going to be a lot of opinions about this. Poetry, poet being the artist, poetry and being a poet goes hand in hand. Like if you're a baker, cooking goes with that.
Right.
And then your product is the cake. If you are a singer is the position, and the music and your instrument or your voice is the product, and the song is what you're delivering. How is it that if you go online, especially on like the Instagrams and the Facebooks and a lot of the social medias, we give the product away, or we'll be invited to an event. When you guys get invited to an event, is it hopes that one person is sitting out there and say, hey, I want to sign you, I want to give you a book? You know, we have a lot of you guys that publish books. Very few of the books do I see on Amazon or in the Borders or even taught in school. What do you say to that?
Ooh, child. I don't think a lot of people are as serious about it as they claim to be. Because if they were, then they would put more into seeing it going further than what they see it as. So, you know, just like a lot of people with their dreams, whether it's the present or the past, it becomes stagnant. If you don't press the issue ain't gonna get pressed.
So, like, you have that novice singer singing on the sidewalk in New York City, and guys throw a couple of coins, and, you know, he has another job he goes to. And, you know, we have something called vocational and bivocational individuals. And when I say vocational and bivocational, I'm talking about, yes, I am, quote unquote, a poet, but I also, as you said, you work at CVS. How do you balance, and what gets priority? Do you go with what you love, or do you go what you have to? Because this is something that I think a lot of people don't realize, and it's not just for poets, but we're talking about poetry this evening in our unveil. There's a difference between surviving and being successful. How do you know in poetry which you are?
Oh, wow, that was a question. Okay, so some questions.
I told you this is Poetry Unveiled, and we ask the most difficult questions we possibly can because it makes you, as a poet and a established writer. I mean, you have publications out. You have 3 books out. 2 that's one just current. I think it came out at the beginning of last month. So my thing about it is how do you know when you are surviving and when you are successful? Because like when you go to the NBA, when you basketball, you play as a basketball player as a little kid, and you play on the streets, and you just survive, and you're surviving the basketball lifestyle. And then all of a sudden you go to high school and college, and then you graduate, and then you play for college, and then hold and behold, an agent comes by, and then all of a sudden you got 23 on shirts, and people are buying them for $80, and you blasted across. And so now you went from surviving to successful. When does a poet, or how do a poet recognize the difference between surviving and being successful? Because I've been on a lot of you guys live, and I heard a lot of the product that you deliver, and I take and I write notes down. I have a notebook yay thick, and I write notes. I see the way you use words, and then sometimes I look at the people who follow and how many hits, and that's just the audience. That's not it. But my thing about it is how do you know, or how do you become or go from one area to the other? How do you know that?
Okay.
Or when do you know that?
Okay. So when you get to where that's all you can think about, that's just like once you learn, okay, trying to find a good example for this. Okay, being a new mother. When you become, if you have been wanting a baby so bad, and you probably didn't even know you wanted a baby, and you become this new mother, and all of a sudden life, you smell scents you never smelled before. You notice things you never noticed before. You're more cautious because you have somebody else to account for, right? Like with your gift. All of a sudden, when it really hits, you thrive in it. And when I say you thrive in it, it's like when you're not even trying to do it, you're doing it. Whether it's at home, whether it's in the closet, whether it's when you're getting ready, all of a sudden you boop, 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 boop. You're like, oh, that was, because sometimes, I do it. I'm like, oh, that was quick. I'm going to have to say it one more time. Your thriving goes to successful. You have to get there. You have to start.
Right.
Engage in what your talent is, which is acknowledging this is my talent. Okay?
But when does that engagement come? Like when do you like sit down with the pen without any audience, when you sit down and you say, hey, I'm a poet, but I'm a surviving poet because I have to survive this. I know writers have something called writer's block. Mm-hmm. Do poets experience that?
I'm sure they do. Because poets, they're writers too. They just write in poetry, but it's still a form of writing. That's, again, we can become stagnant. A lot of times, all of a sudden you just can't seem to find that button. And it's just like, okay. Sometimes you're just overthinking it. Like anything else. You can overthink anything, actually. Overthinking it, or you may have spent too much time engaging in just what stuff that had nothing to do with you. Mm-hmm. Stuff that's not going to benefit you, had nothing to do with you. Your nose in somebody else's business that has nothing to do with you. And by the time you figure it out, how many years have passed you by?
Wow. So let us shift gears now. Mm-hmm. You guys get a lot of events. I've been to a lot of events in Houston, and a vendor or another poet or somebody has a production company, they invite you to speak at their venue that they have. Thirsty Thursdays. And they say, hey, the one, I want you to speak at my event. Is there events that you would turn down, and why?
I'm sure there is. I haven't really turned down any events. The only way that I would turn down. Well, I have, but that was because bills gonna start coming, baby. Bills are gonna come regardless. And if I'm talking about paying my car note and being carless or going to your venue, baby, you're not gonna see me at your venue.
Okay. So a lot of poems and a lot of poets are in a stage of survival mode, would you say?
Yes.
And so what really we don't examine, we don't talk about, and this goes to you guys, your promoters, and if you know somebody promoting or having a venue, how come the poet is not compensated? And in your opinion, what is worthy compensation to an established poet? I mean, here it is, you wrote 2 books. How is it that these promoters and these people that do these live things, and they say, hey, I want you to come on live and give your product free. Now, I'm just saying it like it is wrong. You know, they just say, hey, come on my live and recite a couple of poetries free. And they say, oh yeah, we're trying to get the art out there. And we're trying to get you exposure and all that because we have a big following. We have 100K followers. But at the same time, when the lights go out and you're offline, you have to come to this reality. When Michael Jordan steps off the court, he's still Michael Jordan. Mm-hmm. When an actor or actress step out in front of their camera, their lifestyle reflects their calling and what they are. Have you ever, or do you know a poet, other than the late, great Maya Angelou, and I keep using her as an example because she is undisputably a great poet, and her lifestyle, I had a chance to meet her a few times, and this woman, out in front of the camera, she is still a poet. Her lifestyle reflects it. People want her. People come up, hey, look, I want you to come do an event, speak at our school. She's getting $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 off of it. But here it is, we say that we want to help the poetry community. And we want to have these little events. And don't get me wrong, I'm not speaking against any of the events. You guys keep promoting and keep having the events. But my question is that a lot of poetry, a lot of poems, and a lot of poets get stuck in that loop. I've met a poet like yourself doing poetry for 25 years. And if I say to them, do you have a book published? No. If I say to them, has poetry bought you a car, a house? Do you have a bank account under your poetry? Is your name trademarked in a CD? Do you have a promoter? Do you have somebody that's going to take you from survival to success? And if that does exist, why do you guys give the product away free?
So, just like that person who plays basketball for fun, that's really good. Everybody in the neighborhood knows he's good. Mm-hmm. Until that right person comes along that can snatch him up and compensate him, you have to keep doing it. It's a meaning to get noticed like anything. That singer who's a great singer and haven't found that perfect deal, guess what they keep doing? They keep singing. Wow. I mean, if you don't operate in your craft, whether it's for $10, $25, or if it's for free, you still are getting acknowledgement from somebody. That somebody, word of mouth travels. That somebody's going to tell somebody that's going to tell somebody that's going to tell somebody.
Right.
Then eventually you get into, I just had an event at home, and I'm just like,
we're going to talk about that event because I was actually there. I was actually the host at the event, and a couple of my questions later are going to come from that event. But speaking to the promotion side of poetry or the transitional side from I'm trying to get discovered, Steve Harvey tells an incredible story how he started off as a comedian. He was a comedian and he was in his 20s and he wasn't successful until he was 36. That's when he became, but he kept going at it and at it. But the thing that he said through it, he was getting paid. I think he got paid $50 and he got paid $70. And then what happened is he kept just pushing, pushing, and people recognize him. What is the poetry recognition like? Who would have to recognize a poet the transition, because we have like Bad Boy Records, they doing music. We have Warner Brothers, they do music and a lot of other things. You have Tyler Perry Studios, they do acting. Who's the person out there that you could tell other poets, hey, let's call this person and have them at our venue, and if the venue is worthy, will he come? And the poets that showcase. Because you remember something, live is seen everywhere around the world. I have a guy online who's watching it in Germany right now. I have another friend of mine in Hong Kong, they're watching it at their job because they teach all year round. And so they're chiming in, hey China, hey Tech, his name is Technum, how you doing Tech? And he was one of the guys that like, hey, are you going online, how you going online? And he said, wow, poetry, do y'all have a poetry stadium? So who is the person to recognize our poets here in our cities, no matter what city you're in, who recognizes you to take you through that transition? Who recognizes that kid on the basketball court and say, hey, I want to sign you? Who out there that does that? And if you guys know somebody like that, please drop their name, tag them in there. We can get them on. I can get them in for an interview, and we can get some love spread. But who do you know? Because I asked another poet this, and he had no idea. He just know somebody is going to recognize me one day, and I'm going to be big. So what's the transit? How do you get from survival to success? If you don't know the bridge or the gatekeeper.
Right. Unfortunately, I don't know either.
Wow. And that's something, people, that we really need to pour into poetry. Like when you guys have these events, don't be afraid to invite a counterpart who does not look like you, because they might have the means. And you guys know what I mean when I say don't look like you. I mean, it's one thing to be in a bar and got speakers and the microphone don't work, or the speakers don't work, or the DJ playing off music. If you're hosting that event, or if you have that venue, I think things happen. I'm talking about accidents that happen. I'm talking about when we genuinely trying to push this poetry, like we pushing drugs. A drug dealer can take the most destructive thing and become a billionaire, well known, looked at by the FBI, street wreck. How is it that the poet, the thousands and thousands of you guys out there that get online and spit your poetry, because remember, you're giving away your talent, you're giving away your product free. Now, I'm not talking about the free spirit. Hey, if you got it like that and don't want to get paid and just want to get online and lives and do poetry, that's fine. But you guys that are serious, that publish books, that go to events and say, hey, we want to promote the art, who are you connecting yourself with? And I'm not talking about other poets that don't have anything like you don't. Because one of the things that Denzel Washington spoke about was his circle and a lot of other people of influence. And one of the things that he said was, I surround myself with people who have more than me, because they give me the opportunity to grasp what they have, or they have the opportunity to invest in me. If you have a book out there, how many of your family members bought your book? How many people in the neighborhood know you? How many people, I mean, it's one thing you selling 500 copies. Hey, I applaud that. But why settle for 500 copies and not 5 million copies? Why not have a poetry house that published poets and go on TV? You know, they just started a new app where you can buy airtime on TV. I want to see how many people take advantage of that and come online. Because remember, our goal, my goal, is to push poetry where it'll be just as big as hip-hop music. Because I believe you guys are just as talented. And speaking of talented, we're going to take a break from the questions, and we're going to have Miss Denise give us one of her poems out of her new book. And we're going to give her an opportunity right now, and you can pick any one. I'm pretty sure you talk about memory. We're going to talk about memory. We're going to talk about reciting. We're going to talk about how you feel and all that in the audience later in the second half. But we're at the halfway mark, so with no further ado, we're going to have Miss Denise do 2 poems. I'm gonna make it 2 poems. Somebody just requested for 2 poems. So I'm gonna have her do 2 poems from her new book. And again, what's the name of your new book?
It's called Emotional Stamina.
Where can we find the book?
You can find this book at lulu.com, LULU.com.
And what about yourself? How can we find and follow you?
You can follow me on Instagram at SANDERSGY. And you can find me on Facebook at Denise Sanders.
Okay, so this video will be posted, so remember to reach out, follow her. I'm Mr. Retard X, and I'm at all platforms, aka Mr. Looney X, on stage, comedian, and also art analyst. So right now, we're going to hear Denise, we'll turn it over to you and give us 2 of your poems out of your new book. Emotional Stamina, y'all. This is definitely a treat.
Okay. One moment. In my quiet time, I sit in mental conversation with that moment. Blank silence and closed eyelids, daydreaming about us. To be or not to be, but I can still feel your king-sized hands around my waist, holding me close. Us fumbling each other's hearts and scoring a touchdown on the other's behalf. And you making me laugh past all the pain and anguish, putting aside stereotypical bullshit and placing love above it all. But still we fall to this moment. Us knowing each other's flaws and still kissing each other's lips like we lived in our own village on top of a hill. Us picking cherries and spitting watermelon seeds, racing to the house to see who would wash the other's feet. Accelerated and elevated heart levels just to lay next to royalty. Us king and queen on silk sheets, our scents in each other's noses competing with the heat. And carrying the love torch even as we sleep. I mean, how deep do you dive into my heart, baby, just to remove the doubt? I then had to shake myself and open my eyes to realize that in that one moment, baby, you just wasn't strong enough to pull it all out. One moment.
Wow, that was definitely great.
Okay.
And these are from her new book, Emotional Stamina. And I advise you go on her page and get the book. And it's a wonderful book. I mean, the way you look at it, you open it up. Can you hold up the book? You hold it up and you see it's actually a boxing ring. And you wonder, like, what is this book about? But it's definitely a treat, and I advise you to go out and get it. So what's going to be the next one we're going to hear?
Okay. So, apology. Sitting here waiting patiently for those empty words, routine and consistent, mummified by the repetition, amazed at how easy those same words roll off your tongue and flow from one's lips, blank stare, focused on nothing but can't seem to blink, my heart racing itself and I'm waiting on the finish line time for my heart to stop beating from another lame ass apology. It slows to listen. Astonishing because I can tell your future by having to sit and listen to you. Records you have broken in time and I am a witness. Co-sign. Insane because none of what I have co-signed for has gotten me anything and you are a bogus credit score of excuses. How I am functioning is unknown. Paying my heart with fool's gold and I accept it foolishly every single time. We laugh and we joke, but baby, at this rate, mama gonna need more than some dope. To insane my sanity or is it to finally be sane? No blame though, just facts. I'm not going to know how to act when you finally get some act right. Like a crackhead being taken to a detox facility. My body fighting against itself because it knows better. Reality has its way of eating at you. Like flies on crap, you and apologies have an unhealthy relationship. And me, your Mona Lisa, is always caught not few, not far, but always between. You know I'm afraid of heights, so why the roller coaster ride? Sick of being sick. Am I bold enough enough to cut off the part of me that is linked to you? Do I just sit and do nothing while I watch the gang green called you take life from me? Baby, my love can't survive another apology.
Wow, that was great. Those were two of Miss Denise's, the one, those are two of her poetry. Like I said, you can find it in her new book, Emotional Stamina. So follow her on the platform. Definitely pick you up a copy. I was very impressed by the book. So now we're going to jump into our second half, and we're going to get ready to wrap it up. I wanted to speak about, you have over 80-something plus poems that I know of that I've seen or tracked down, or if I compared both of the books together, that's over 50 poems. How many of them do you have memorized? Percentage-wise, I'm not going to ask for a specific number. Like, what percentage of your poetry do you have memorized?
Very small percentage, actually, because if you are truly a part of your gift, sometimes it's draining. If it's attached to you emotionally, it can be draining. But I am working on memorizing a lot more, just because I don't like reading the same stuff when I go out.
Right.
You know, some stuff I might start out reading it, and then a few months later, but iPad where? I got this. So I expand myself on purpose just because know better, do better.
Oh, wow. And so when you prepare, like I've been on a couple of events and the poet got lost and had to go to something totally different. And I don't know if that's like stage fright. And I mean, these are seasoned poets that's in the game as long as you are. How do you prepare, or how do you stay like programmed? Like, you know, a singer, when they do a concert, they can't mess up and start a new song in the concert. You know, you have to either improv or you have to roll over and keep on, and then your poetry sounds choppy because we know as the listener, hey, it should have been something else there.
Right, because the momentum was different. Okay, so, oh God, this was, so some years back, and this is personal because that's happened to me a few times actually. Most people don't know I'm actually a natural shy person. Now, I love people. I love people, and some people say I have a big personality, but I'm shy at the same time. And to some people, it's not going to make sense. But since I am a naturally shy person, I had to learn my way of focusing when I was on stage. Everybody does not have the same it factor as far as you staying focused on task. Okay, a few years ago, I was at this club, just starting to get out there, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Then back then, I was working 7 days on, 7 days off, and they was having this competition, and I'm like, let's do it. Why not? You only live once. You know, my thing was, I don't care whether I win or lose. It's the fact that I challenge myself to do it. Okay, so I go. Of course, nobody knows me. I don't know anybody, and I'm naturally shy, so all these faces are making me nervous. On the outside, you would never know that. But on the inside, I'm probably sweating bullets. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. So I actually went the first night, shut it down, did the dang thing. Now, I was put into a money pot that I was supposed to come back the next week. But since I worked 7 on and 7 off, I couldn't. I had to tell him I had to come back the following week. Because you go back into the competition where you left off. Okay. And I was like, well, I would have to wait till the following week because I worked, because this was on a Tuesday. And I was like, okay. So by the time I came back, so many people had heard about me, right? I can tell you, I was fly-headed. I was working the hills now, and that's what get most people, because when I talk, a lot of times I dive in like a man would dive in, but I got on 6-inch heels at the same time. When I saw all those people, you know, like when you have those big street rap battles and how they stand up like this, I had people that were doing that. Wow. And it scared me. Wow. And I was like, all these people here to see me, and I choked. It took me 2-3 years to get back on stage after that.
That's incredible.